you're not really sure what you're going to do. Willpower often does not work. You can't do it through willpower. You have to do it through who you're going to be.
성공하고 싶다면 성공만 생각하셔야 합니다. 아직 당신이 성공하지 못한 이유는 성공하기 위해 90% 이상 노력을 했지만 100% 성공만을 보고 뛰어든 건 아니었기 때문입니다. 실제로 진짜 성공한 사람들은 올인할 수밖에 없는 경험을 다들 했다고 합니다. 자신의 100%를 갈아넣은 것이죠. 하면 된다라는 말이 있죠. 적절한 동기부여와 의지력만 있으면 못할 게 없다는 말입니다. 그런데 의지력은 아무 소용없다고 주장하는 세계적인 베스트셀러 작가가 있습니다. 벤자민 하디의 노빠꾸 영상을 시작합니다.
Elko is an entrepreneur from Amsterdam. He's 38 years old, and he as well has struggled with weight his entire life. And he's always had a bad diet, and he's always had a story in his head that was actually planted in there from his mom. His mom told him when he was a teenager that they are the kind of people who always are going to struggle with weight, always struggle with food. And so that was the idea that he had in his mind. He actually also had the idea in his mind that he was going to be able to potentially willpower his way to holding off just self-destructive behavior until about his 40s, 50s, or 60s. But then at that point, it would just go all downhill. And because of his bad eating habits, he actually struggled to sleep. He couldn't sleep very well. And so one night, he was up all night, struggling to sleep, and a thought came to him. What if I just went back to nature and just ate clean? What would happen if I did this for the rest of my life? Rather than thinking, what if I did this for like 30 days? Or what if I did this for a year? And all of a sudden, he has like this vision, this picture in his mind of himself in his 90s, totally vibrant, totally healthy. He sees himself with his kids, his grandkids, and at that moment, he just makes the shift. From that moment, he saw what was possible, and so he just committed to it. He's one of the healthiest people I know, hasn't touched any bad food since then. He lives under the mantra, 100% commitment is easier than 98% commitment. And one of the questions that I asked the wannabe entrepreneurs and the actual entrepreneurs was, have you ever had a point of no return experience? And almost all of the wannabe entrepreneurs said no. A lot of them hinted to the idea that they hope to have that experience one day. Almost all of the entrepreneurs said yes. And not only were they entrepreneurs, I asked lots of authors, professional people at all scales, and they all said yes. So my follow-up question was, well, what happened after that experience? And actually, I was interested firstly in what was that experience? What was the point of no return? What created that shift? Then my next question was, what happened after? But I was kind of surprised. What often created a point of no return experience was making a financial investment in the goal. So I interviewed like a 17-year-old entrepreneur, for example, and his point of no return experience was when he and his friend, they were both seniors in high school, when they put their money together, their savings, they invested $10,000 into a huge shipment of shoes because they wanted to sell shoes. And when a huge truck came and offloaded basically a mountain of shoes, he said he realized that at that point he couldn't go back. He couldn't give the shoes back. He had this mountain of shoes now completely filling his garage, and basically at that moment, his identity shifted. He said at that moment he realized that he was running a company, that he was leading a company, and from that moment forward he acted from that leadership role. So he put himself in essentially a position where he had to move forward. That's why it was a point of no return. He's a totally different person. How you do anything is how you do everything. That things like fad diets, a 30-day diet, trying something for a year, is not a way to change your behavior, because changing your behavior has to be first a shift in identity. When you shift your identity first, then the behavior that is up here where your goals are is in alignment with your identity. If you keep your identity down here and you're trying to act up here, then you're actually acting in conflict with how you see yourself, and that doesn't work. Do I eat it this time? Do I not eat it? And that right there, that mental tug-of-war, is called decision fatigue. Basically, the idea of decision fatigue is, it's another word for willpower, but it means you haven't yet made a choice, and you're not actually sure what you're going to do, and because you're not sure what you're going to do, often the situation wins. That's one of the most consistent things that's found in social psychology, is that generally people are the byproduct of their situation. And the reason for that is because people are not decided. Michael Jordan actually had a very powerful quote. Michael Jordan said, "Once I made a decision, I never thought about it again." Psychologists have found that on average, people have about 50,000 thoughts a day. And Nate said that about 40,000 of those thoughts were about food. He couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's essentially the nature of addiction, is that you can't stop thinking about it, and he was very addicted to food. And that's why the Michael Jordan quote is so important, that once you make a decision, you no longer have to think about it again. I don't want to have to think about this ever again. And once he let that go, then all of a sudden they were able to be exactly who they wanted to be. Once they were able to actually make a decision and cut off the alternative option by committing 100%. Then all of a sudden their mind was completely free, and they felt so aligned with who they were that they started doing things that they had been procrastinating for years. Elko started a business that he had wanted to do for 3 years. Within a week of having that vision of seeing himself, he had already started. And since then, he's done all sorts of things that he's always wanted to do. Nate's the same way. Ever since he's been able to let this thing go, and he's stopping, he's no longer avoiding the behavior that he hates, and he's now pursuing the life he loves, because he's so aligned with who he is and where he's going, and because the story he's telling himself is based on that future, not based on, well, this is why I am the way I am. Then all of a sudden, he could be more courageous. He could be more confident. Thank you.
주변에 보면 적당히 열심히 해도 다 먹고 살고 있습니다. 100%를 갈아 넣으면서까지 살 필요가 있나요? 하지만 100%의 마음을 모아 결정한 사안에 집중하지 않으면 적당히 마음먹은 만큼 누군가에게 끌려가게 됩니다. 또한 100%가 아니라 원칙을 한번 깨게 되면 매번 생기는 특별한 상황으로 당신은 원칙을 깨는 사람이 되어 있을 것입니다. 노옵션 상황. 올인할 수밖에 없는 상황에 놓여서 100% 다하는 것만으로 끝나지 않습니다. 성공을 원한다면 그에 맞는 일을 해야 합니다. 내 자신이 변호해야 합니다. 내가 가진 원칙을 100% 지키는 것이 98%를 지키는 것보다 쉽습니다. 자, 지금부터 이것저것 하느라 결정을 하지 못하고 100% 헌신하지 못하는 사람 대신 결정한 그것을 위해 배수의 진을 치고 내가 할 수 있는 100%를 쏟아내보시기 바랍니다. 당신은 우주의 유일한 사람입니다.